What is up, guys? Dzeeff here, and happy Valentine's Day. Hopefully you were able to use some of my amazingly romantic Yu-Gi-Oh tweets to ask your crush out on a date today. But in today's video, we're focusing on much more serious things than flowers and chocolate. We're going to talk about part 2 of the banned Xyz Monster series. Now, in part 1, I mentioned that there were 11 banned Xyz Monsters, 10 of which are still banned to this day, and we reviewed about half of them. So in today's video, we're going to start in 2017, which actually had a pretty crazy ban list happen where 3 different Xyz monsters got banned on that exact same list. And also, just like I mentioned in part 1, I do want to mention again that one of the cool things about looking at Xyz monsters is that of all the extra deck mechanics out there, fusions and synchros and links, and we can even count pendulums in there even though they're more of a main deck mechanic, out of all of those different mechanics, it's Xyz monsters that find themselves mostly on the ban list more so than any of those other mechanics. Obviously, there are more main deck cards on the ban list than Xyz monsters, but there's a lot of Xyz monsters that have been banned, and I think it just goes to show how powerful the mechanic was. Not to mention that 8 out of those 11 were actually rank 4 monsters, and we only covered one non-rank 4 monster in the last video, so in today's video we're going to have mostly rank 4s, but we will have 2 non-rank 4s, and those cards, I mean, have to be so powerful to be good, because rank 4s have sort of historically been the easiest Xyz monsters to summon, so for something to be good enough to be banned at not a rank 4, it means that it must be pretty darn good. It's crazy to think about just how much of 2017 was defined and dominated by the Zodiac archetype. Released almost right after the turn of the year, Zodiacs were able to dominate the metagame for over half the year, format after format after format, banned card after banned card after banned card, but it wasn't until September of 2017 when actual Zoo cards got banned, as well as another Xyz monster. In the past, there had been cards like Norden banned and Terratop limited, but it was September of 2017 when the Zodiac deck, at least for the TCG, finally died. And the first card that was banned of these 3 on this exact same list was Daigusto Emerald. Now, in the last video, we talked a lot about Lavalval Chain, and interestingly enough, Daigusto Emerald was released in the exact same set, Hidden Arsenal 7. This card had been used and abused in a variety of strategies, and it's crazy to think about that it took this long for that card to get banned. Featuring an awesome deck recycling power, as well as a free draw and a sort of side effect where you can special summon a normal monster from the graveyard that would occasionally come up with things like Gemnite Garnet, Daigusto Emerald was one of the best and most consistent ways to recycle your cards, especially good at recycling extra deck cards, of which oftentimes you're only playing a few copies of. One of the reasons that Zoo was such a powerful deck was because not only could they do a bunch of stuff with their own like archetype cards, these Zodiac monsters, but they could also end on one Daigusto Emerald to recycle back many of the combo pieces that they use, and perhaps more importantly, one of the craziest things about Daigusto Emerald was the fact that you could use one copy to recycle a second copy, basically giving you infinite monsters as long as you can keep summoning level 4s to make a rank 4 Xyz monster every single turn, and all throughout that you're getting a free draw in the process, and that is just way too much advantage and way too much grindiness compared to the other decks of the format. So the fact that Daigusto Emerald was being played in already what was the best deck, Zodiacs, makes it so much better, and that's probably why it finally got hit in September of 2017 as opposed to earlier years. The card certainly saw play in plenty of tier 1 decks, but it wasn't until Zodiacs where players really started to take advantage of the fact that you could recycle other copies of Emerald with your second copy. However, on the September 2017 ban list alongside Daigusto Emerald, the actual Zodiac monsters themselves couldn't help but get banned, because prior to this, you had Rapier get hit, and you had cards like Terratop and Norden get hit in place of Zodiac cards, but in September of 2017, Konami finally said enough is enough, and they banned not only Zodiac Broad Bull, but also Zodiac Trident. Now, it is worth mentioning that in the OCG, they just banned Trident before hitting Broad Bull, and the Zodiac strategy was actually still playable, which sort of begs the question, which one is better than the other? I think both of them are equally crazy and shouldn't be in the format, and I actually spent an entire video talking about these Zodiac cards if you're interested in learning about them a little bit more. These cards on paper might not seem better than other cards out there, especially cards that maybe even haven't been on the ban list. However, the Zodiac strategy was way too consistent, and anytime that you could summon one Zodiac monster, you could go through all of these Zodiac Xyz monsters off of that one normal summon. You don't even need 2 monsters, because all these Zodiac Xyz monsters can just be summoned on top of a differently named card, which made them way too good for Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm glad that they got banned eventually. Pretty much every single person was playing Zodiacs, and if they weren't playing Zodiacs, they probably weren't winning. So yeah, by the time September 2017 rolled around, people were pretty sick of that deck. By sheer coincidence, it wouldn't be until 1 year later in September of 2018 until another Xyz monster was banned, and that was MX Saber Invoker. Now what's interesting is kind of what I just mentioned, in that this card was actually used in Zodiacs, and the reason that it stopped being used was because they limited Speedroid Terratop, so the Zoo strategy didn't have a really good way to summon Invoker. And Invoker had been used in a few other strategies. Madolches played it, Windups played it, just a lot of warrior-based decks played Invoker, but it wasn't until Gokis came out where this card suddenly became a problem, because Invoker in Gokis was cool on one hand because you had lots of old school cards like Marauding Captain actually seeing play just to make this thing. However, it was way too good. If you could resolve an Invoker, you could make a full extra link board complete with negations and bounces. It was just way too good. One singular card should not be able to have that much power wrapped up into it. It's obviously very strong in a variety of decks, but if you compare just the Zoo board that you were making with Invoker, which was good, I mean, it had Trident and Emerald and you drew a card, but compare that to a full extra link with a bunch of cards in hand, obviously the second one, the extra link, is much harder to break and just shouldn't be allowed in Yu-Gi-Oh! These days, we still do have a few extra linking strategies, but after Konami took some steps to ban many of the link monsters that actually made that possible, like Nightmare Goblin and Firewall, those sort of strategies sort of fell off the map for now at least. But Invoker was a huge reason that Gokis were successful. You had this crazy level 3 build with Marauding Captain and Junk Forward and all these other cards, even Gillosaurus made an appearance. And while all those cards are cool and it was interesting to see them in combination at the top tables, I think one of the things that Konami has hopefully learned as years have gone by, maybe not so if you look at Summon Sorceress, but it seems like anytime there's a card that can summon things from the deck, like Invoker, like Windup Carrier Zenmaity, those types of cards really have to be kept in check, because the thing with Invoker is sort of like reinforcement of the army but on a new level. Anytime Konami prints an Earth Warrior level 4 monster, they now are stuck with this situation where, okay, wait a second, Invoker can always just summon it from the deck, and there's always level 3 monsters that you can play. Even though Terratop got limited, like, people were still finding other cards to play. So anytime Konami printed a card that Invoker could summon, they had to balance that new card around Invoker, sort of like reinforcement of the army, sort of like Windup Carrier Zenmaity on a smaller scale. So I think that's one of the reasons that Invoker got banned, was Konami wanted to open up design choices for other level 4 Earth Warriors. And after all that, after all those ban lists spanning over 5 years, we finally come to the most recent banned Xyz monsters, both of which were found on the January 2019 ban list, so the most recent one that came out. And that's kind of what I was talking about in part 1, where I was saying that Xyz monsters sort of transcend time. I mean, these cards are still getting banned years after they came out. I think that's pretty cool just from a power level standpoint. Anyway, the first of the 2 cards that was banned on the most recent ban list, we have number 86 Heroic Champion Rango Miniad, or as most people refer to it as just Rango Bongo. This card was one of the cards that made the Dark Warrior deck so deadly. Even though Nightmare Goblin was banned, even though Firewall Dragon was banned, this is a card that they were using to secure wins. They would summon this using some material, and then they would use the Gossip Shadow rank 3 monster to attach more material to it, and they would basically just kill you because you couldn't summon anything and they blew up your board during your end phase. That's a pretty big deal, and they could do it fairly consistency. And it's also worth mentioning that if you got rid of this card, or if you prevented them from making it, a lot of the time they could just take out your entire hand using cards like Aqua Dolphin and Gumblar Dragon, which the latter was actually banned on this same list. So this card is just super oppressive, and I think once Firewall Dragon got banned, there were a lot of discussions about this card and Gumblar Dragon that would sort of ruin the format. And to be fair, that didn't actually happen. I mean, Dark Warrior was a good deck, but it wasn't even in the top 3 most topping decks of last format. Firewall Dragon getting banned really hurt the deck a lot. Even with Rango Bongo, and even with Gumblar Dragon, and even with Aqua Dolphin and Neospace Connector, it just wasn't consistent enough. It suddenly lost to like 1 hand trap, where Firewall Dragon really prevented it from losing to a lot of hand traps because you could just keep looping stuff out of your hand and graveyard and things like that. But still, it's a strategy that you don't want to play against when you go to a tournament, so it makes sense that Konami hit those cards, even though they probably should have been hit on the same list that Firewall Dragon was hit as well, just to sort of take out any sort of chance of those crazy combo decks being viable at all, because that's pretty much everyone's least favorite part about Yu-Gi-Oh! Just watching your opponent solitaire turn after turn after turn. And that brings us to the very last Xyz monster, the most recent one that was banned right alongside Rango Bongo, and that is number 42, Galaxy Tomahawk. It is worth mentioning this is the only rank 7 on this list. I believe in the OCG, Big Eye was limited at one point, but at least for our format, this is one of the only rank 7s that has ever been touched on the ban list, and for a good reason. This is one of the only cards in the game that actually got a buff from link summoning. Certainly a lot of token cards did get buffs, but overall many cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Sort of took a hit in consistency or power level because of the link summoning mechanic, but Galaxy Tomahawk was the card that actually got better, because prior to link summoning, this thing would only summon 4 tokens, and you couldn't really use them for a lot. There were some like Karakuri synchro crazy combos that you could do with the tokens because they're level 6, but where this card shines is when you can put it in the extra monster zone and now summon 5 tokens, and those tokens can be used for a variety of link summons. You can make Skulljud with them, you can make like half an extra link with it, and this was a card that had to be banned mostly due to the fact of the danger monsters. Danger Nessie and Danger Dogman were way too easily summonable, and they're both level 7 monsters that you could make Galaxy Tomahawk with, and this helped part of the Danger Dark World FTK. It just helped a ton of decks out there make these crazy ridiculous boards with a ton of link summons because of all the tokens. So this card finally got banned, and you can kind of see on this balance, I talked about this in the balance reaction video, Konami really wanted to kill combo decks. They banned Gumblar and Rango Bongo and Galaxy Tomahawk, and now we still see combo decks, but not nearly to the same level as all those warrior decks that were just putting out their ridiculous boards that no one could break while also ripping out like half your hand. Anyway though, that's pretty much going to wrap up today's discussion video, the part 2 of reviewing every single banned Xyz monster. Let me know which monsters you think I should review. You know, I get a lot of comments from people saying, hey, can you review every single banned card? And that's a little bit too much. I don't think anyone wants to watch like a 6-part video reviewing every banned effect monster, but there certainly are fusion monsters that have been banned, and synchro monsters that have been banned, and pendulum monsters that have been banned. Let me know which one of those you might want to see in a future installment to this series. I'll see you later though. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Goodbye.